5% of income for a period of 4 years. It will not carry any interest, and therefore you don't need to worry much about the taxation of the interest usually which a deposit carries. So this is, to an extent, it is a saving which has been thought of by the government, and this interest, I mean, there would be no interest, and now it would be refunded after a period of 4 years. Nothing has been provided that whether you would be able to obtain a loan against the security of this deposit, or you would be in a position to give a collateral, use it as a collateral for the purposes of supporting a withdrawal transaction. Yeah, as we said, that finally the charge is in respect of an undisclosed income or an income in the form of cash or any deposit with the specified entities. The question therefore which one will have to address is that, that is it therefore that the eligibility for getting into the scheme is only when I am in possession of a cash on the date of my declaration, or it is that cash which I have deposited with the specified entities, and then only I am entitled to declare it. Now, as we would see that, yes, that the scope of this scheme is for several years. It includes even assessment year 2017-18, that is the current fiscal year, and before it would end, before the year would end, the scheme would be over. It would be closed, and therefore even a half part of this year could also be covered for the purposes of scheme. That is the way one would like to read the scheme. So therefore, what is essential is that when the scope extends to an year other than assessment year 17-18 to all other earlier years, whether time barring or not, whether beyond the reach of reopening or not, the important issue which one will have to examine is that, should I be holding cash at the time of declaration? Should I be the person who should have deposited it in the specified account, and I should be holding it as a balance as on that date? Usually this would not be practical, for the reason that, yes, that those whosoever had cash and they had deposited it in the bank, even post 8/11/2016, one would see that, yes, that this money which has been deposited is back to back utilized for making some payments, for acquiring some other assets, and therefore the question which will have to be addressed is that as on the date, see that declaration which is being made, it is representing an income in the form of cash or any deposit, or to begin with, it would satisfy the requirements of the scheme that, yes, I had received the income in the form of a cash, or I had received a check which I have deposited, and both are the cases of undisclosed income for which I need to make a declaration. A subsequent use post receipt should not be something which should be a deterrent, but it is something which one will have to be clear about before one walks into declaration. I would take a very, very simple call that it is something which the government will have to come forward. A clarification will have to be sought that what exactly is being meant when you have expanded the scope to any year up to assessment year 17-18. Why therefore would you restrict it to cash or the deposit? And this is where see, it would be important to refer to paragraph 3 and 4 of the objects and the reasons for introduction of this scheme, which very clearly states that, yes, that the issues which have arisen out of banning of the high denomination currency, it is to address these issues and to provide a legitimate way out to those persons who are holding this currency that this scheme is being introduced. Now, if I read these objects with the language of the scheme, I have a problem, and you all are the persons whom I am looking forward to provide an answer to that. The specified entities are RBI, bank, cooperative bank, post office, and any other specified entity by this. And for any assessment year, the scope, as I have been repetitively saying, is up to assessment year 2017-18. So IDS was one there. It told you that you can walk into the scheme up to assessment year 2016-17, but not for 17-18. And then they say that that you better not In one of the clarification, they say that you better not opt for filing a return of income for 17-18 and include that income. You rather do it for the year in which you had actually earned that income, and that was the right thing. So therefore, this is something, which one will have to really appreciate. That an assessment year 2017, an incomplete assessment year, even before the financial year has ended, you are required to declare income for that assessment year 2017-18, and would it be in the form of cash, or it could also be held in any other form. The words which could have been used is that, yes, that held in any other form, and then things would have been very better. No issue at all. As far as the computation is concerned, you have been told that, no deduction would be allowed against that income. No deduction would be allowed against that income. It would therefore mean that if you have otherwise incurred any expenditure in earning an income, then that should otherwise not be disqualified. That allowance of that expenditure should not be. I could not think of some examples whereunder when I have to deposit cash, see, I have an issue about expenditure. I would rather not raise such an issue and get into some problem once again. But the point is, technically, theoretically, one is trying to explain that, yes, that if an expenditure has been incurred against this income, then that would not be something which would be allowed to be deducted. The second is that no set-off of any losses which you are carrying forward or even for that year. And I would therefore believe that even there is some loss which is in respect of the identical source of income which I am offering for offering under the scheme, that also is not something which would otherwise be eligible. Ideally, I don't see any reason, because whatever is the net income in my hand, that's something which I would be declaring. The head of income perhaps is not required to be explained, and the rate of tax is something, which is a flat rate, which is you pay 50% and get out of it. Whether you will get the benefit of threshold or not, there are number of questions which is talking about threshold, and we will see, whether at that time we can address that issue legitimately. This deposit I have already talked about, please. Yeah. This declaration is, as one would see, that it's not something that it is a call on you that you need to. It is not mandatory, it is optional. If you wish to get into this scheme, then make a declaration. It's optional, it's not compulsory, not mandatory, and therefore if you have not opted for this declaration, then in that case there is no penalty or there is no stringent provision which in IDS provided that if you do not declare it under IDS, then 197C of the Finance Act 2016 provided that you better watch. If you have not declared it, then in that case we will have an all-pervasive power to look into that, and irrespective of the reopening limit and number of years, they would get into this. Whether that was possible or not is a different story, but there is no such stringent provision as far as this Yojana is concerned. The declaration will have to be filed before a person who is a principal commissioner or commissioner and who has been notified in the official gazette. This is slightly different than the IDS. It has to be signed by a person who is a person authorized under section 140 of the Income Tax Act. And it will have to be, of course, filed during the notified time, and it has to be in respect of an income which otherwise one would believe is chargeable to tax. And it could be, as I said, for any assessment year up to 17-18. There is a provision for treating some of the declarations void, that is, that when you misrepresent or suppress the facts, when you misrepresent or suppress the facts, IDS provided for misrepresentation. Now there is a company to misrepresentation, so suppression of facts also will result into a declaration being held to be void, ab initio. If you make it without payment of taxes, etc., if you make it without depositing the money, the declaration would be considered to have not been made. This is that any person is eligible to make a declaration provided he has any income. He could be a resident, non-resident, and as I am once again reminding you that it should be by a person who is the owner of a cash or who has deposited in the bank. for the specified entity. Who are the ineligible persons? In spite of being told that yes, that the earlier IDS when it listed certain ineligibilities, there had been a confusion in terms of the language and the drafting. The language continues to be same, that some of the ineligibility is qua the person, some of the ineligibility is qua the acts or actions. So a person who has been detained under COFECOSA is outside the scope of this. Then any I would believe that any cash or bank deposit, which is covered by the Foreign Income Asset Management Act, that is BMA, that also is out. Then a person who is notified under the Special Court Act also is out. I don't know the one who was covered in 1992 by under that act, how would he have cash or deposit in 2016 to make that deposit? But then, it is there, so we keep on talking about it. Then this is something, which we need to appreciate is that there is an ineligibility, it is not qua person, ineligibility in respect of prosecution for offence under the 6 listed acts. Now what is not clear to me at least is that that whether it is talking about a situation wherein a person has been prosecuted, or is it talking about a situation wherein a prosecution has been launched in respect of it, or it is talking about a prosecution which is possible in respect of a person or in respect of an offence which has been committed by a person. So it is very, very loose-ended, and therefore, see, like a loose cannon, it can fire in any direction. So anyone who has nothing to do with any of this need not bother about it. Ideally, one would have taken a call that yes, that if I am in receipt of some cash, or I have deposited something which has something to do with narcotics, drugs, or Indian Penal Code, then that is where I would not be entitled to. That is what Public Corruption Act also should be. But I believe that there is a need to clarify this situation once again, to put the issue beyond doubt. Then immunities. Immunities is, there is one immunity, and that is that that whatever has been offered in the declaration, that would not be once again included in the total income of a person under any of the provisions of the Income Tax Act. And I would extend it to mean that under any of the provisions of Income Tax Act for any assessment year, under any of the proceedings. So therefore, whatever I have declared, it's outside the scope of the taxation under the Income Tax Act. There is a promise of confidentiality to the extent which is otherwise permissible under Section 138. The government had to bite the dust time and again when it came to income disclosure scheme by repetitively assuring the assessees, the declarants that yes, that you don't need to worry, we are not going to share this information with anybody unless we are being asked. Earlier they started with the story that to the extent what is permissible under 138 we will do so. But if it is in public interest, we will have to share the information. But later on, there had been a somersault, and therefore they kept on assuring that we would not share this information with anybody. And I would therefore believe that whatever has been clarified under IDS could perhaps be utilized for the purposes of this Garib Kalyan Yojana also, because all those persons otherwise who would be offering also would need some shelter, some protection. It has been very clearly provided that on the basis of the declaration which has been made, no third person can obtain an immunity on the basis of this declaration. This is perfectly all right. This is the way the law has been understood by all of us, that yes, that if a person has deposited 10 crores of rupees in his bank account in high denomination currency, or any income for which a declaration has been made, and back to back that person has been giving this check by way of a loan to the third party, then in the books of the third party would still be required to explain the 3 parameters, that the genuineness, the creditworthiness, and the identity of the person who has lent the money. On this also, under IDS, some different kind of a noise or a promise was made. Whether that would be available or not, one will have to see. There is no specific provision for immunity under penalty for penalty under Income Tax Act, for prosecution under Income Tax Act, under Wealth Tax Act, under BTPA, under PMLA, under FEMA, or even under the indirect tax. So one will have to fend for oneself, one will have to seek answers from Mr. Sridharan and Dilip Bhai, that whether we will have immunities under those acts or it will be presumed. We'll have to also seek answers from Shivram that whether we will have safety net as far as the penalty is concerned, prosecution is concerned, or that there would be issues surrounding that.
I don't know anything I can answer, sir. You said it will not be included in income under the Income Tax Act.
Yes,
line.
yes.
Therefore, there will be no penalty.
No, very well. I just am just placing it before them because my job was to introduce it. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The rest I don't know.
There are disentitlements that, on the strength of declarations, you as a declarant would not be able to demand a reopening of a completed assessment or a reassessment. Obviously, the Supreme Court way back has said that, a person cannot demand a reopen, or even when in the course of reassessment, one cannot seek a relief. But there is a provision which is telling you that yes, you can't do so. It's also saying that on the strength of declaration, you cannot claim any relief or a set-off in an appeal or a reference or such other proceedings. So this is as regards the disentitlements are concerned. You would not be able to claim the refund, tax, surcharge or penalty of the amount which you have paid under this Kalyan Yojana. Independently, if you are entitled to a refund, it is something, because there is one of the questions concerning that, which is something which should not be prohibited by this provision of 199J. Yeah. Then care has been taken to say that yes, that the provisions of 159 to 180A, that is representative assesses, legal representative and such other cases, these provisions would apply to the declaration also. It has also been provided that if principal commissioner or such commissioner were to entrust the job to their subordinate authorities, provisions of section 119 would apply. Then sharing of information, unless it is proven to be in public interest, would not take place. An assessment of a dissolved firm as per section 189, those provisions will come to the rescue of a person who is seeking to declare an income of a dissolved firm. Yeah. The government has, government has been entrusted with the power to make an order to remove any difficulties, provided it is done within a period of 2 years, and such an order is tabled before the Parliament, both the houses of the Parliament. Then it has also been vested with the power to make rules, and these rules are required to be like an order presented before the houses of the Parliament. Yeah. The last but important one is that all of us are aware that in the context of income declaration scheme, numerous circulars have been issued, clarifying several issues, and on the last count there are about 66 clarifications which have been issued by the government. I am otherwise also about to sit down. Yeah, so whether these circulars, these clarifications will come in handy in understanding the Kalyan Yojana or not is something we need to address to. My personal call would be that yes, why not? See, otherwise, that has also been an income declaration scheme, and this also is, though differently name, is nothing but IDS 2 only. Yeah, next. This is something comparison in few slides one has made. If you like, you may look into them. Next. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pradip, for a very useful explanation on the Pradhan Mantri Kalyan Yojana. We have the next speaker, Dr. Dilip, very, very senior and a very experienced professional in practice for over 40 years. He has been in counseling in areas of foreign exchange laws and anti-money laundering law, non-resident investments, and international taxation. He is a doctorate in law from University of Mumbai, and he is a visiting lecturer at the University of Mumbai on international business law and LLM. He has a very long list of achievements. Because of constraint of time, I would not take the liberty of running into it, but just to say briefly that he has authored several articles and books, and also he is presented several presentations on FEMA, FERA, and Anti-Money Laundering Act. May I request our past president, Mr. Manocha, to do the honors of presenting a memento to Dr. Dilip K. Seth. I present Dr. Dilip K. Seth.
Mr. President, Hitesh Bhai, Chairman, Rahul, seniors in the profession, my Guru Dastur Sahib, other seniors, my co-panelists, Dr. Sriram, Mr. Sridharan, and Pradip Bhai. Before I start the overview, I must say, I thought that my position was like the last man in the musical chair holding the ball when the music stopped. So for a moment I thought that straight away they will start panel discussion, but they've been kind enough to spare me. I am grateful to Paresh T. Shah, Chartered Accountant, Harish Butch, Chartered Accountant, and Rishabh Mehta, Chartered Accountant, for giving their inputs on subjects where I had some doubts. I am also grateful to Asni, who has kindly agreed to help me with the slides movement. Some basic observations before I start. I ignored theoretical, social and other aspects like how many persons died while standing in the queue. That's not the subject. And I confine myself strictly to legal position on the subjects given to me, namely FEMA, money laundering and Benami law. When I was in college some years ago, 50 years ago, Signam College, 1962, I was very fond of English music. And one song, very melodious, which I used to hear was Black is Black, Give My Baby Back. Today what the government has done is virtually that and something more. The government says black is black, give my taxes back. Unfortunately, those areas have already been covered. So the question in the mind of people is that, is there anything more than the tax which has some implication? The answer is yes. There are other laws, money laundering, there is PMLA, Benami law and FEMA. Now within a short time, I would like to just cover overview of these three laws. Now in PMLA, the provisions are, first is the, like a charging section, offense of money laundering is defined in section 3. That leads to another important concept of proceeds of crime under section 2U. Then there is a punishment for money laundering. There is a provision for attachment, a provisional attachment of the property involved in money laundering. Then there is a very ferocious power which was earlier in section 35 of FERA, and people thought that FERA is gone and the power of arrest is gone. I must caution you that power to arrest without warrant has been reintroduced in a very hidden form in section 19 of PMLA. Then there are some presumption in interconnected transaction section 23, burden of proof on the person charged, that is of course rebuttable, section 24. Civil court jurisdiction is excluded, meaning thereby that government wants to go on a fast track in Shatabdi speed. Now if you want to sidetrack and take a Kachar guide, that is not permitted. If the civil court jurisdiction is not excluded, then maybe the matter will linger on for maybe 15 years, 20 years before it is concluded. The PMLA offences are triable by special court. Again, the government's intention is to put everything on a fast track. The offences are cognizable. Now this is very dangerous because section 2C of CRPC defines what is cognizable offence and what is cognizable case. There they have the power to arrest. And the last one is PMLA overrides all other laws. So in case something inconsistent is found by the authorities who are to administer PMLA, they can say that we have the overriding